the spring of 1998, my husband Mark and I moved into an old farmhouse on the outskirts of Baraboo, Wisconsin. We had just gotten married and were looking for a quiet place to start our lives together. The house was charming. White wooden siding, a wraparound porch, a red barn in the back, and an attic that the realtor casually dismissed as just storage space. We spent our first days cleaning and unpacking, enjoying the quiet of rural life. At night, the frogs and crickets created a peaceful hum that put us to sleep quickly. But I always felt a strange tension when passing by the attic door. It was a simple wooden panel in the ceiling of the hallway upstairs, and something about it made me uncomfortable. Mark laughed it off. "Every old house creaks," he'd say. But this wasn't creaking. It felt more like the house was waiting. A week into living there, I began hearing footsteps above our bedroom at night. At first, I assumed it was just the house settling or maybe raccoons in the attic. But one evening, the footsteps stopped directly over our bed and didn't move for minutes. It felt like someone, or something, was standing there, watching us from above. We checked the attic the next morning, but found nothing. No raccoon droppings, no signs of entry, and no loose boards that could explain the sound. Still, every night, around the same time, the footsteps returned. Mark started hearing them too. Sometimes we'd hear a dragging sound, like furniture being slowly moved, but when we'd go up, everything was untouched. The attic remained dusty, quiet, and cold, as if mocking us. Curiosity eventually drove us to examine the attic more thoroughly. One rainy afternoon, Mark pulled down the ladder while I held the flashlight. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, broken frames, and cardboard boxes. In the far corner, buried under a moth-eaten tarp, we found a large iron-bound trunk. It was sealed shut with a rusted lock and a leather strap that looked hand-stitched. The trunk radiated an uncomfortable aura, and neither of us wanted to touch it at first. Eventually, Mark tried to open it, but the lock wouldn't budge. "We'll need bolt cutters," he said, but we left it alone for the night. The sound of the rain tapping the roof seemed to amplify the unease that now filled the attic and our home. That's when the whispering began, always at exactly 3:17 a.m. Soft at first, like someone murmuring just outside the bedroom door. We'd wake up and listen, hoping to identify the sound, but it always faded before we could make out the words. One night I stayed up and recorded the audio. When I played it back, a woman's voice could be clearly heard, whispering my name over and over. Mark was skeptical until he heard it himself. From that night on, he stopped saying it was just the wind. We tried sleeping downstairs, but the whispers followed us. They always came at the same time, always said the same thing, and always felt colder than anything we'd ever known. Mark returned to the attic one afternoon to reinforce the beams. He called me up with a shaky voice. "Liv, come see this." There, etched into one of the wooden beams, was a child's drawing scratched with something sharp. A family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children. But one child had been furiously crossed out. Below the drawing, someone had carved the word "liar" repeatedly. Neither of us knew what to make of it. We hadn't found any information about the previous residents having children. It was as if this memory was hidden or erased. The attic's temperature dropped noticeably that day. We started to feel like we weren't just living in a house with a past. We were living in its memory. A week later, after a particularly restless night, we heard a loud bang above us around 3:17 a.m. It wasn't just a whisper, it was a crash. Mark ran to the attic and climbed up. The trunk was wide open. No lock, no strap, just open. Inside were old clothes, tiny dresses and shoes, now moth-eaten and damp. A cracked porcelain doll lay face down, and underneath it a bundle of letters tied together with twine. The letters were written by a woman named Margaret. They detailed how her daughter had been accused of unnatural behavior and locked in the attic to be cleansed. The final letter simply read, "She won't stop crying. I've sealed her in. May God forgive me." After we opened the trunk, everything changed. The air in the house became heavier, the nights colder. Doors slammed on their own. Lights flickered, even after replacing the wiring. I began feeling watched constantly, especially when alone. Mark started sleepwalking. I found him one night standing at the attic ladder, reaching up with a blank expression. When I touched him, he screamed in a voice that wasn't his. I cried for hours that night, terrified and helpless. We both knew something was now awake, and it wasn't going back to sleep. Desperate for answers, I contacted a spiritual medium named Claire from Madison. She arrived the next morning and stepped inside without a word. After a few minutes, she said, "She's here." And she's scared. When I asked who, she looked toward the ceiling. The little girl, but there's something darker, something that kept her here. Claire refused to go into the attic. She said the darkness had anchored itself in that space. It's not just a ghost, it's a wound in the house, and it's bleeding. Her advice was blunt: leave now. Don't wait. Mark didn't want to believe her, but I'd already made up my mind. The night before we were set to leave, we awoke to smoke. The attic was on fire. We rushed up, fearing we'd lose everything. The flames were strangely contained, centered only around the trunk. We doused it quickly, and no structural damage spread. But as the smoke cleared, we saw a message burned into the rafters. "You promised." We didn't sleep the rest of the night. We packed what we could and left the next morning. I didn't even say goodbye to the house. Whatever lived there had once been a child, but now it was something else, something broken and angry. A year later, while visiting a friend in Baraboo, I couldn't resist. I drove past the farmhouse. A for sale sign hung out front again. As I parked across the street and looked up at the attic window, my breath caught. She was there, a little girl with dark eyes and a white dress, staring down at me. Her mouth moved, and though I couldn't hear the words, I could read her lips. "You left me." I drove away and never looked back. But even now, in the reflection of windows or the shimmer of glass, sometimes, I swear, I see her, waiting. I never thought a house could change your life, or nearly destroy it. In 2001, after a messy divorce, I was struggling to raise my 3 kids alone. I wanted stability. I wanted peace. That's when I found the house on North Christina Avenue in Union, Missouri. It was a beautiful old 2-story home with a big porch, hardwood floors, and even a white picket fence. The rent was oddly low, but I convinced myself it was just a lucky break. Maybe the landlord was just eager to fill the place. We moved in during a sunny May afternoon. The birds were chirping. The neighborhood was quiet. And for a moment, I thought we had a fresh start. The kids picked their rooms with excitement. We laughed as we carried boxes up the stairs. It felt right. But sometimes things that feel right at first are just waiting for the perfect moment to unravel. There was a heaviness in the air, subtle but unmistakable. And I would learn soon that some houses don't want to be homes. It started with the voices. At first, they were faint, like distant murmurs, always just out of earshot. I'd be in the kitchen and hear what sounded like children whispering in the hallway. I'd turn, expecting one of my kids, but they'd be outside or asleep. My daughter came to me one night with wide eyes, saying she heard someone call her name from inside her closet. I checked it. Nothing. I told her it was a dream. My youngest, barely 6, woke up crying, saying he heard someone crying too, from under his bed. I comforted him, told him it was just the wind, but the wind doesn't sound like a woman weeping. The voices never spoke clearly, just soft murmurs and sobs, I even tried playing music to drown it out. But silence always came back, and with it, the whispers. Looking back, it was like the house was introducing itself, softly, politely. But that politeness was about to end. Weeks passed and we settled in, or tried to. Then came the scratches. One morning, while cleaning, I noticed 3 long, jagged marks running down the hallway wall. They looked like claw marks. I touched them. They were deep, fresh, as if something sharp had raked down the surface. I asked the kids, but no one knew anything. I painted over them, trying to shake it off. The next day, the scratches were back. Longer, deeper. I felt a chill every time I passed that spot. One night, my son came to me in tears, lifting his shirt to reveal red scratches on his back. They looked identical to the ones on the wall. He swore he hadn't done anything. That was when I started to realize something else was with us in that house. Something invisible, yet violent. I installed night lights in every room, but darkness found its way in, and the walls kept bleeding new marks. The basement door always creeped me out. It was thick, old, and sat just off the kitchen. I tried to keep it locked, but it opened on its own, often creaking in the middle of the night. I once stood in front of it, listening. Behind it, I heard a dragging sound, like someone slowly pulling something heavy across the floor. One afternoon during a thunderstorm, the power cut out. I went down to the basement to check the fuse box. The second I stepped down the stairs, the temperature dropped. It was icy, unnaturally so. Then I heard a low growl, right behind me. My flashlight flickered. I spun around. Nothing. But the air felt thick, like something was watching me, breathing down my neck. I ran up those stairs, slammed the door shut, and nailed it shut that night. I told my kids it was unsafe. The truth? I was afraid of what lived down there. Then came the shadow. At first I caught glimpses, quick darting shapes just out of view. But then he began to show himself, tall, black, faceless. I saw him one night in the upstairs hallway. He stood at the end, motionless, a towering silhouette darker than the night around him. I blinked, and he was gone. My daughter began drawing him, always in corners, always watching. My son said he saw the shadow standing over his bed, staring. He screamed so loudly one night, the neighbors came over. We stopped sleeping. We took turns keeping watch. But you can't watch something that lives in shadows. You can only hope it watches quietly. There was never a time in that house where we truly felt alone. Even in daylight, there was always a presence. It fed on fear, and we were full of it. It all exploded one night in July. The house came alive. Doors slammed shut violently. Windows rattled, and something began banging on the walls, like fists pounding to get out or in. The screams started next, not ours, the house's, deep, echoing, blood-curdling screams that seemed to come from every wall, every room. My daughter collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My youngest clung to me, shaking. We couldn't stay. I grabbed a backpack, shoved in some clothes, and told the kids we were leaving. We left everything behind, furniture, photos, food on the table. I didn't even lock the door. We slept in the car that night at a rest stop, and even there I swore I could still hear that house, calling us back, screaming for more. I couldn't rest. I needed answers. I reached out to local paranormal investigators and historians. What I learned chilled me to the core. In the 1940s, a woman named Delilah lived in the house. Her husband, a deeply jealous man, accused her of infidelity and set fire to the basement, hoping to trap her. She died screaming. He later hanged himself in that same basement. Every tenant after reported strange activity. Some claimed the house whispered to them. Others saw apparitions. Most left within weeks. No one stayed as long as we did. The investigators found high EMF readings in the walls. One even claimed he was scratched during the walkthrough. Whatever haunted that house, it was old, angry, and deeply rooted. I needed closure. Foolishly, I went back, with 2 investigators and a priest. The house had been vacant for months. As we stepped inside, the air was cold and still. Dust covered everything, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt asleep. We set up audio equipment, cameras, and thermal scanners. Within minutes, the batteries died. Doors slammed by themselves. The temperature dropped sharply. A mirror shattered in the hallway. Then came the voice, deep, guttural. "Get out." All 3 of us heard it. It wasn't from a speaker. It wasn't on playback. It was real, and it was loud. We didn't argue. We left. I've never stepped foot inside that house again. After we left, I thought it was over, but it wasn't. The nightmares continued. My daughter woke up screaming about fire and shadows. Lights flickered in our new home. Once I saw him, the Shadow Man, standing in my hallway again. It was brief, but I know what I saw. I had the home blessed, saged, protected. Things calmed down after that, but trauma leaves a scar, and something still lingers. Sometimes I wake up at night and feel it, that same presence, watching. It's been over 20 years since we lived in that house. My children are grown now. We don't talk about it much. But sometimes when we're all together and the room falls silent, we all feel it, that shared experience. That invisible bond forged in terror. The house still stands. New families have come and gone. None stay long. Every now and then I'll drive by, just to see. And every time I swear I can hear it, the screaming, faint, like it's still waiting, still hungry.